Hello, my name is Richard Haight, and today I'd like to discuss the concept of transcendence. It is, again, because it's a concept, invariably there's going to be some confusion between the meaning of the word, depending on how one perceives that word. And if you were to have 100 people and you were all to ask them what transcendence meant and really explored it, you would find that most of them meant something slightly different, and in many cases something greatly different. Recently, I received an email from a reader of The Psychedelic Leap. Note, I have changed the name of the book to The Psychedelic Path. I had some trouble with advertisers who would not allow advertising under the term taking the psychedelic leap, as it was, according to them, a promoting illicit activity. I can see their point, so I've changed the name to The Psychedelic Path. So if you're interested in looking that up, please look it up under The Psychedelic Path. In any case, I digress. The reader was sending me an email intending to correct certain statements within the book that they perceived as being imprecise or false, specifically with relationship to the terms detachment and transcendence. So the statement was that with detachment there is no suffering, and that the human being is in the middle place of evolution, and that enlightenment was impossible in the human form, and that enlightenment only occurs post-human. And therefore, this life has no meaning and no value from that perspective. That there is only love, there is only transcendence, and that survival means nothing. Now, this is a very, I think, common perspective among non-dual thinkers and people who've had transcendent experiences that then interpret those experiences through the mind. The original experience was transcendent. It is what it is. It is not purposeful specifically. It is a state of perception. It's not right or it is not wrong. It is as it is. And it is reflective of a certain perception, that perception being a non-embodied perception. Again, if you listen to the previous video, I talk about non-duality, you will quickly see the pitfall that leads one into. First is that this form is wrong. This form is to be transcended in order to be in order to experience love, in order to experience connection. It is this form that prevents love and connection, and the desire of this form to survive. Now, if we just do a little switch here and say that the form of your baby is what is causing your suffering. The form of your baby is what is limiting your perception. The desire for your baby to survive is what is wrong. You will quickly see how dangerous and unhealthy that view is. Now, individuals that hold that view, they don't necessarily recognize this point. That in their mind they have delineated, or they have created a timeline and placed the current human existence on this timeline, and enlightenment at some point in the future. This moment is wrong, and that some point in the future where this form no longer exists is transcendence and right, which means enlightenment or awareness of that as a way of being now is not possible. And that our very existence is the barrier to the complete love experience. This perception will ultimately lead, it doesn't happen immediately, but over time what it leads to is a psychological breakage. And the reason it leads to a psychological breakage or disconnect is because your mind has already calculated out, your unconscious mind, your nervous system has already calculated out what that statement, what that thinking means. And what that thinking means is the body is to be destroyed. the body is wrong. It is a condemnation of the body. It is a direct defiance of everything that you ever value or ever could value in existence. It is a direct condemnation of experience itself, which means all of this is useless. The end result, whether you recognize it or not, is ultimately a nihilistic point of view that life is meaningless. It leads to suicidal tendencies. It may not lead to angst, but it leads to a hollowness, and then a constant juxtaposition between where one is and where one wants to be, which is love. Now, such individuals will tend to define themselves as love. I am not about the body. I'm not about knowledge. I'm not about all of that silly human stuff. I am love. I am transcendence. I am all that is. And if you actually perceive what's going on there, that very sentence, I am all that is an attempt to equate what you are, the self, to all that is. It is a superego. It is extraordinarily out of balance. And this is not to blame the individual. I have done this in the past. I've been through that. I understand where it leads. And it doesn't lead to good places. It leads to a lot of condemnation, even if in the moment we don't realize it. The issue is that there are two fundamental perspectives within the human being. One that we normally access, which is the dual perspective. It is me versus other. It is the way that all thinking works. I can see the table in front of me and I recognize where it is relative to the body so that I don't harm myself. I can see the food over there and I can feel the hunger within the body, and I know how to navigate to that food and get the food into my body, and I have a meaning, a value associated with that food, and a meaning association that allows me to understand that that food will nourish the body and allow the body to continue existence. This is not wrong. It is what is. It is a part of all that is. It is not wrong. Now, the other perspective is a disembodied perspective. It is one that we can find this again through meditation. Oftentimes, very deep levels of meditation. This is oftentimes a challenge for people who've not meditated a lot to experience. It may occur or may not occur. For some people, it may never occur, just depending on how willful they are in their meditation processes. It often occurs in the psychedelic experience, sometimes near-death experiences, or just sudden mystical experiences that occur unexpectedly. The essential point is, when these occur to sufficient degree, there is a perception that the body has been transcended. It is as if the body blends into all that is or disappears entirely, and there is only this, I call it the heavenly state, or the pure soul state. There is no sense of self at all. There's no sense of time. It is pure bliss, undifferentiated consciousness. And when we come back from that experience, we're not really coming back from it, but when perception shifts back to the dual perspective, with the perspective in the body, then the body then becomes this strange, feels like this strange, almost alien thing that we're sort of imprisoned in. There's a dissociation sometimes between consciousness or perception and the body, and this idea that we are different than the body, and that the body is a prison, and that the physical experience is wrong, that we are somehow higher than that or better than that. But that very interpretation is a result of the mind misunderstanding. The difference between mind and consciousness. Mind, as I will describe it, is what defines and allows for physical existence. It allows for thinking. It allows for emotion. In that total experience, there is no thought. There is no emotion. There's feeling. And this feeling is of unconditioned bliss, totality. There is no specific thought. There is no specific feeling, a specific emotion. But returning into the body, then the body doesn't know what to do with that. It likes that. Our perception likes that and wants that and aches for that because we felt alone our entire lives. We felt somehow disconnected our entire lives. And now we finally got that hit of connectedness and we want that. And this thing is what is preventing us from experiencing this. This is now the prison and this is wrong. And so we go on the search for transcendence. And ultimately that search, with the particular interpretation that we've had, cannot lead to a healthy life. I am not about love. I'm not about transcendence. I am not about anything in particular. Because that is an egoic statement. I am this or I am not that. It's arrogant at its foundation. There is an assumption. I'm not saying I am arrogant. I'm not saying the person is arrogant. I'm saying the very thought itself is based on an assumption that all that is exclusive, or all that is anything in particular, or that it could ever be defined, or that it's not something in particular. All that is includes this bodily form. And when awareness comes into balance, where the form is included in all that is, then we're no longer caught between the timeline of the present and the future transcendence which we're aiming for. We're no longer stuck between this concept of the wrongness of the body and the rightness of the totality. Instead, there's an awareness that moves from the center, the very center of the physical body through the body and includes all that is. And at the same time, that very same awareness is coming from all that is and penetrates the body. It's actually one field that can be perceived either way. It's largely irrelevant the way it's perceived. It is relevant to some extent, but for now, at this level of the conversation, it doesn't matter so much. The point is, the non-dual perspective typically is exclusive of the physical. It's non-dual. It doesn't allow for the sense of relativity. It doesn't allow for or doesn't value the sense of self and other, or me and other, or this body and that object. But there can be no function in the world. There can be no values without the perception of this and that. The issue comes when we believe this to be 100% real and that to be 100% real, and they are disconnected. So what we do is we soften the dual perspective and we soften the non-dual perspective. And then both come together in a harmonious one. And that is unity. It is including the body and physicality and recognizing and feeling the connection between the body and physicality and all that is. And what ends up happening is it's a very strange perspective. Maybe it sounds very strange, sounds very woo-woo. It's not, actually. When one has it, it's shocking and surprising. But it is as if everything around us is connected. The walls, the computer, everything is somehow alive and aware. And that it cares. And that it is watching. There is watchingness. That includes this body and all of the cells within this body. This mic, the computer, the wall. All this. Is that actually what's happening? Is that actually true? No, I can't say that. That is the perception. That is the perception. And then the way we express in the world matters. Because the way we express in the world is felt by the walls. It's felt by the mic. All of these things care. Typical non-dual perspective is not caring about these things. They're just trivial. It's just an illusion. No, that is a statement against your baby. That is a statement against everything that you value in your life. Don't drink the water. Don't eat the food. Don't hug your baby. Because all of that is suffering, and all of that is wrong. Just kill yourself. That's what the statement ultimately means, and that's how the nervous system perceives it. And over time, that thought will formulate and rise into the brain, into the window of perception, and be perceived as a sudden hollowness and meaninglessness, a uselessness of life. This may be years later, but it's guaranteed to happen. And then we're wondering, why are we depressed? What is this hollowness? It's not an accident that it occurs. It was born and guaranteed to rise to consciousness, rise to awareness, rise to perception. Now, awareness means experience. One is guaranteed to experience that suffering. The way around that suffering is to include all that is. It includes the physical, whatever we think that is, in the total perception. And to value the physical as well as the total, value the specific as well as the total. All of this is part of you, and you a part of it. So then the question becomes, well, geez, it all wants to be happy. It all wants to be acknowledged. Acknowledge it. Do a little bit right now to make everything just a little bit happier. It sounds like a ridiculously simple concept to be happy. It's just an attitude. It's so simple that it's elusive to the mind. And you practice that. And you practice that because you care about your baby. And you care about the wall. You care about this. This is no more or less valuable than everything else. So don't be seduced by any one perspective. The dual versus the non-dual. Whatever it is that is truth has to be a functional truth. It has to be a functional truth. If it's true, it will fortify the body. It will create a greater sense of connection to all that is. And it will lead to the healthiest psyche, or healthiest state of soul, now and in the long term. All right, I think that's it for today. I've got a few public mentoring sessions coming up. If you're interested in going over any particular spiritual blockage that you're encountering, any form of suffering that you're encountering, and then you were sincere in your path of spiritual awakening, and that is the purpose for the call, not a psychology call, then we can have a conversation on Skype or Zoom or some other form of I'm really not technically savvy, and I will record that video and put it up for all to learn from. You can contact me at contact@richardhaight, HAIGHD.net, and just include the subject title, public mentoring, and delineate what it is, the issue that you would like to talk about and why it's important to you. I do not do spiritual trivia. I do not do politics or any of that sort of stuff during mentoring sessions, because that's not really what's ailing you. Now, of course, behind the politics is what's ailing you. So, and what is ailing you is not just ailing you, it's ailing many people. And that's why your conversation will potentially be of service to thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people over a period of time. So it's a great service. If you would prefer to have a mentoring session that's private, you go to my website, www.richardhaight.net, and you'll see a mentoring tag. Go ahead and click that and read about the mentoring that I offer privately. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Oh, click subscribe.